In the 11th year, in the first month, on the 7th day, so now we're backtracking to close to where we were before in chapter 29. 10th year, 10th month, 12th day. 11th year, first month, 7 days, so a little less than 2 months later from that vision. But long before the vision we just got done reading, which is in the 27th year, so many years later. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, I have broken the arm of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. It has not been bound up for healing or put in a splint so as to become strong enough to hold a sword. This must be referring to Pharaoh's complete inability to help Judah fight Babylon. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against Pharaoh, king of Egypt. I will break both his arms, the good arm as well as the broken one. So he's already broken one, he's going to break the other one too, and make the sword fall from his hand. I will disperse the Egyptians among the nations and scatter them through the countries. I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon and put my sword in his hand, but I will break the arms of Pharaoh, and he will groan before him like a mortally wounded man. I will strengthen the arms of the king of Babylon, but the arms of Pharaoh will fall limp. Then they will know that I am the Lord, when I put my sword to the hand of the king of Babylon, and he brandishes it against Egypt. I will disperse the Egyptians among the nations, and scatter them through the countries. Then they will know that I am the Lord. In the 11th year, in the 3rd month, on the 1st day, so a couple of months later. So we're getting these updates pretty frequently now, aren't we? And the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, say to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, same Pharaoh, Hophra, same guy, and to his hordes, who can be compared with you in majesty? Consider Assyria. Remember them? Once a cedar in Lebanon. So we're comparing Assyria to a majestic cedar of Lebanon. Once. They used to be. They're not anymore, but they used to be. So consider Assyria. So how do we compare Egypt? Well, let's think about Assyria. Remember them? They've been defeated. They're gone. They're out of the picture. But let's think about them for a bit. They were once a cedar in Lebanon with beautiful branches overshadowing the forest. It towered on high, its top above the thick foliage. So it was a mighty, majestic tree that towered above the other trees. The waters nourished it. Deep springs made it grow tall. Their streams flowed all around its base and sent their channels to all the trees of the field. So it towered higher than all the trees of the field. Its boughs increased and its branches grew long, spreading because of the abundant waters. All the birds of the air nestled in its heights. Its boughs. All the beasts of the field gave birth under its branches, so it was a shelter for both bird and beast. All the great nations lived in its shade. It was majestic in beauty, with its spreading boughs, for its roots went down to abundant waters. The cedars in the garden of God could not rival it. So even the trees of the Garden of Eden were not like this tree, or the other nations around, nothing compared to Assyria, when Assyria was at its peak. Nor could the pine trees equal its boughs, nor could the plane trees compare with its branches. No tree in the garden of God could match its beauty. So here's that garden imagery again. Ezekiel mentions the garden a number of times. We read about it back in Tyre. We talk about Tyre being in Eden. And we weren't talking about the Garden of Eden from Genesis 1 and 2. We were talking about the new garden that the temple and tabernacle represented, that Tyre was instrumental in helping the Israelites build by providing the materials and the men and the plans, probably, of how to do it. So that's what garden they were in. They were in the garden. They were in the new garden of God, in the form of the temple, not the garden of God, the Garden of Eden from Genesis 1 and 2. I made it beautiful with so Ezekiel, and we're going to see it again at the end of the book, and we're going to see a new version of this garden visualized at the end of this book. So Ezekiel does talk a lot about the garden. as the dwelling place of God, the place where God meets his creation. I made it beautiful with abundant branches, the envy of all the trees of Eden in the garden of God. Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I did that to Assyria, but Assyria fell. It's like Assyria is long gone now. Babylon came and took out Assyria about 40 years ago at this point. Because it towered on high, lifting its top above the thick foliage, and because it was proud of its height, I handed it over to the ruler of the nations, for him to deal with according to its wickedness. I cast it aside, and the most ruthless of foreign nations cut it down and left it. Its boughs fell on the mountains and in all the valleys. Its branches lay broken in all the ravines of the land. All the nations of the earth came out from under its shade and left it. All the birds of the air sat on the fallen tree, and all the beasts of the field were among its branches. Therefore, no other trees by the water are ever to tower proudly on high, lifting their tops above the thick foliage. Of course, the trees here represent the nations. No other trees so well watered are ever to reach such a height. They are all destined for death, for the earth below, among mortal men, with those who go down to the pit, the underworld, the land deep beneath where we are, where all the dead go, the wicked dead, or the dead in general. This is what the sovereign Lord says. On the day it was brought down to the grave, I covered the deep springs with mourning for it. I held back its streams, and its abundant waters were restrained. That sounds a lot like the flood, when he unleashed the waters of the deep to cover the earth then. Because of it, I clothed Lebanon with bloom, and all the trees of the field withered away. I made the nations tremble at the sound of its fall, when I brought it down to the grave with those who go down to the pit. Then all the trees of Eden, the choicest and best of Lebanon, all the trees that were well watered, were consoled in the earth below. So these are the ones that have already come and gone. These are the nations that have already fallen and have joined the ranks of the defeated. Those that fought against God and raised themselves up high and said, I'm great, I'm mighty, and now they're all in the earth below, just sitting around doing nothing. Doom and gloom. Those who lived in its shade, its allies among the nations, had also gone down to the grave with it, joining those killed by the sword. Which of the trees of Eden can be compared with you? So now he's talking back to Egypt again. So he talked to Egypt and said, what do you like, Egypt? Let's consider Assyria here. As great as Assyria was, it's gone. I had my king Nebuchadnezzar come and wipe it out. What do you think I'm going to do to you, Egypt? Which of the trees of Eden can be compared with you in splendor and majesty? Yet you too will be brought down with the trees of Eden to the earth below. You will lie among the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword. This is Pharaoh and all his hordes, declares the sovereign Lord. In the 12th year, so a little bit later again now, in the 12th month and the first day, about a year and a half after our previous vision, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, take up the lament concerning Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and say to him, you are like a lion among the nations. So we're once again calling out this Pharaoh Hophra guy. You are like a monster in the seas. Remember the monster idea from back in Genesis and in Job? This idea that there was a sea monster and that God had to fight in order to make creation. Now the Bible itself doesn't ever really say that, but that was a very common belief and myth in the world at the time, that there was some sort of sea. In fact, some of the myths around Israel, I forget which exactly, held that the God made the world itself out of the remains of this dead sea monster that he had killed. So that's kind of the imagery we're evoking here, although I think we're talking about him more like in the sense of fishing a crocodile out of the river, but we are kind of comparing him to a monster. You are like a monster in the seas. So the word there is tanning, Hebrew word tanning, or how you pronounce it. Thrashing about in your streams, churning the water with your feet and muddying streams. This is what the sovereign Lord says. With a great throng of people, I will cast my net over you, and they will haul you up my net, like you haul up a crocodile in a net. I will throw you on the land and hurl you on the open field. I will let all the birds of the air settle on you, and all the beasts of the earth gorge themselves on you. I will spread your flesh in the mountains, and fill the valleys with your remains. I will drench the land with your flowing blood, all the way to the mountains, and the ravines will be filled with your flesh. That sounds like the plague of blood back in the Exodus, huh? When I snuff you out, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. There's a call back to the plague of darkness in Exodus. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. All the shining lights in the heavens I will darken over you. I'll bring darkness over your land, declares the sovereign Lord. This, when he's talking about clouds covering the sun, and that meant a lot to these people, okay? The Egyptian belief system was all about the sun and its daily journey around the earth. They thought that every time the sun went down, it had to go through the underworld before it could get back up into the sky again. And they had to pray for it. They had to pray to their gods of the underworld to help it pass through safely, so that the sun could come back up on the other side again the next day. And a lot of the religious belief system at the time looked at things like eclipses and signs of the sun, moon, and stars as bad omens for the country or for the current king. A lot of them did. All of them did, practically. So we're not really talking about, like, Judgment Day in the sense of the day that God blinks out the sun and comes back to earth. It's just, this is a very common imagery from this day and time, because the people were very afraid the sun wouldn't shine someday. I will trouble the hearts of many peoples when I bring about your destruction among the nations, among lands you have not known. I will cause many peoples to be appalled at you, and their kings will shudder with horror because of you, when I brandish my sword before them. On the day of your downfall, each of them will tremble every moment for his life. This sounds actually very similar to what he said of Tyre. The nations around Tyre were going to weep and wail for Tyre's fall. For this is what the sovereign Lord says. The sword of the king of Babylon will come against you. I will cause your hordes to fall by the swords of mighty men, the most ruthless of all nations. They will shatter the pride of Egypt, and all her hordes will be overthrown. I will destroy all her cattle from beside abundant waters, no longer to be stirred by the foot of man, or muddied by the hooves of cattle. Then I will let her water settle, and make her streams flow like oil, declares the sovereign Lord. When I make Egypt desolate and strip the land of everything in it, when I strike down all who live there, then they will know that I am the Lord. This is the lament they will chant for her. The daughters of the nations will chant it. For Egypt and all her hordes, they will chant it, declares the sovereign Lord. There's an idea again of women as professional mourners, setting the laments for the people, singing and weeping, and setting the tone for mourning to the nation. In the 12th year, on the 15th day, so about 2 weeks later, the first month, is about 2 weeks after the previous vision, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, wail for the hordes of Egypt, and consign to the earth below both her and the daughters of mighty nations with those who go down to the pit. So there is constantly an idea that the land of the dead, where the dead go, is somewhere in the earth below, somewhere in the underworld, underground, or whatever. I don't know how they pictured it in their heads, per se. If they thought it was a big underground chamber or cave or cavern or what. I'm not really sure, but they clearly had the idea that the dead went down below somewhere, the earth below somewhere. Say to them, are you more favored than others? Go down and be laid among the uncircumcised. That means the impure and the unclean. Circumcision, the Egyptians practiced circumcision too. And in fact, when the Israelites were in Egypt as slaves, they were circumcised. When that entire nation came out, they had to be circumcised again. Because the circumcision was a sign of the upper class in Egypt. as it was in other places too. So Israel was not unique by any means by practicing circumcision. We're not talking about them literally not having been circumcised. We're talking about them being impure and unclean, dying in a sinful state. That's what that refers to. Go down and be laid among the uncircumcised. They will fall among those killed by the sword. The sword is drawn. Let her be dragged off with all her hordes. From within the grave, the mighty leaders will say of Egypt and her allies, they have come down, and they lie here with the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword. I don't know if the spirits of these dead people really did this. I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't even know if Ezekiel thought that. I just don't know. I don't know how Ezekiel actually pictured this happening, per se. But the message is being communicated here that Egypt is going to go down to the grave, to the land below, the earth below, Sheol, the underworld, whatever that is, with the uncircumcised, as all those other impure, unclean enemy nations have before. And to drive that point home, we're going to start listing off some of these enemy nations that have already fallen, or are already in the grave, or already gone, already dead. Assyria is there, with her whole army. She is surrounded by the graves of all her slain, all who have fallen by the sword. Their graves are in the depths of the pit, and her army lies around her grave. All who had spread terror in the land of the living are slain, fallen by the sword. Elam is there, with all her hordes around her grave. All of them are slain, fallen by the sword. All who had spread terror in the land of the living went down uncircumcised to the earth below. They bear their shame with those who go down to the pit. A bed is made for her among the slain, with all her hordes around her grave. All of them are uncircumcised, killed by the sword. Because their terror had spread in the land of the living, they bear their shame with those who go down to the pit. They are laid among the slain. Meshech and Tubal are there, with all their hordes around their grave. Those are names we have not seen much of in the Bible. And very little, in fact. We'll read about them again. I'll save the explanation for those names until later. But like I said earlier, Ezekiel brings up a lot of different people groups that aren't mentioned very often in the Bible. I think he's doing this to show that God is ultimately the God of the whole world, not just the world that Israel knows. All of them are uncircumcised, killed by the sword, because they spread their terror in the land of the living. Do they not lie with the other uncircumcised warriors who have fallen, who went down to the grave with their weapons of war, whose swords were placed under their heads? The punishment for their sins rested on their bones, though the terror of these warriors had stalked through the land of the living. So these were all fearsome enemies at one point in time. When they were alive, when they dwelt in the land of the living, they struck terror in the hearts of everybody. And now they're in the grave. They can't do anything. They can't frighten anyone. You too, O Pharaoh, will be broken and will lie among the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword. Edom is there, her kings and all her princes. Despite their power, they are laid waste. They are laid with those killed by the sword. They lie with the uncircumcised, with those who go down to the pit. All the princes of the north and the Sidonians are there. They run down with the slain in disgrace, despite the terror caused by their power. They lie uncircumcised with those killed by the sword, and bear their shame with those who go down to the pit. Pharaoh, he and all his army, will see them, and he will be consoled for all his hordes that were killed by the sword, declares Sovereign Lord. So he's not the only one. He's actually going to take some comfort in that. He's going to take some consolation in knowing that he is by no means the only one. Although I had him spread terror in the land of the living, Pharaoh and all his hordes will be laid among the uncircumcised, with those killed by the sword, declares the Sovereign Lord. Okay, I think that's enough. Next time we're going to go back to the story of the fall of Jerusalem as seen from the perspective of the people living in Babylon already. And we're going to read the beginning of the section about the comfort for the Jews and the Judeans as they do have things to look forward to in their future, even though it doesn't look like it right now. So next time we'll begin reading in Ezekiel 33. We're going to try to read maybe up to 37, maybe to 39. Probably. If I can, I probably should try to get through 39. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm still battling a bit of a stuffy head and scratchy throat, which somewhat limits my ability to talk for long stretches at a time. Yesterday I had to leave. I would have done this set of videos yesterday, but I had to leave, so we'll see. I'll get done eventually.